responsibilities of the chase. After the first 5 minutes I had discovered several facts about the Quaker. If the bank was above a certain height, he refused it irrevocably. If it accorded with his ideas, he got his forelegs over and ploughed through the rest of it on his stifle joints; or, if a gripe made this inexpedient, he remained poised on top till the fabric crumbled under his weight. In the case of walls, he butted them down with his knees, or squandered them with his hind legs. These operations took time, and the leaders of the hunt streamed farther and farther away over the crest of a hill, while the Quaker pursued at the equable gallop of a horse in the Bayeux tapestry. I began to perceive that I had been adopted as a pioneer by a small band of followers, who, as one of their number candidly explained, "like to have someone ahead of them to soften the banks," and accordingly waited respectfully till the Quaker had made the rough places smooth and taken the raw edge off the walls. They, in their turn, showed me alternative routes when the obstacle proved above the Quaker's limit. Thus, in ignoble confederacy, I and the offscourings of the Curranhilty hunt pursued our way across some 4 miles of country. When at last we parted, it was with extreme regret on both sides. A river crossed our course, with boggy banks pitted deep with the hoof marks of our forerunners. I suggested it to the Quaker, and discovered that nature had not in vain endowed him with the hindquarters of the hippopotamus. I presume the others had jumped it. The Quaker, with abysmal flounderings, walked through and heaved himself to safety on the farther bank. It was the dividing of the ways. My friendly company turned aside as one man, and I was left with the world before me, and no guide save the hoof marks in the grass. These presently led me to a road, on the other side of which was a bank that was at once added to the Quaker's blacklist. The rain had again begun to fall heavily, and was soaking in about my elbows. I suddenly asked myself why in Heaven's name I should go any farther. No adequate reason occurred to me, and I turned in what I believed to be the direction of Drumcurran. I rode on for possibly 2 or 3 miles without seeing a human being, until from the top of a hill I descried a solitary lady rider. I started in pursuit. The rain kept blurring my eyeglass, but it seemed to me that the rider was a schoolgirl with her hair hanging down her back, and that her horse was a trifle lame. I pressed on to ask my way, and discovered that I had been privileged to overtake no less a person than Miss Bobby Bennet. My question as to the route led to information of a varied character. Miss Bennet was going that way herself. Her mare had given her what she called a toss and a half, whereby she had strained her arm and the mare her shoulder. Her habit had been torn, and she had lost all her hairpins. "I'm an awful object," she concluded. "My hair's the plague of my life out hunting. I declare I wish to goodness I was bald." I struggled to the level of the occasion with an appropriate protest. She had really very brilliant grey eyes, and her complexion was undeniable. Philippa has since explained to me that it is a mere male fallacy that any woman can look well with her hair down her back; but I have always maintained that Miss Bobby Bennet, with the rain glistening on her dark tresses, looked uncommonly well. "I shall never get it dry for the dance to night," she complained. "I wish I could help you," said I. "Perhaps you've got a hairpin or two about you," said she, with a glance that had certainly done great execution before now. I disclaimed the possession of any such tokens, but volunteered to go and look for some at a neighbouring cottage. The cottage door was shut, and my knockings were answered by a stupefied looking elderly man. Conscious of my own absurdity, I asked him if he had any hairpins. "I didn't see a hair this week," he responded in a slow bellow. "Hairpins!" I roared. "Has your wife any hairpins?" "She has not." Then, as an afterthought, "She's dead these 10 years." At this point a young woman emerged from the cottage, and with many coy grins plucked from her own head some half dozen hairpins, crooked and grey with age, but still hairpins, and as such well worth my shilling. I returned with my spoil to Miss Bennet, only to be confronted with a fresh difficulty. The arm that she had strained was too stiff to raise to her head. Miss Bobby turned her handsome eyes upon me. "It's no use," she said plaintively. "I can't do it." I looked up and down the road. There was no one in sight. I offered to do it for her. Miss Bennet's hair was long, thick, and soft. It was also slippery with rain. I twisted it conscientiously, as if it were a hay rope, until Miss Bennet, with an irrepressible shriek, told me it would break off. I coiled the rope with some success, and proceeded to nail it to her head with the hairpins. At all the most critical points, one, if not both, of the horses moved. Hairpins were driven home into Miss Bennet's skull, and were with difficulty plucked forth again. In fact, a more harrowing performance can hardly be imagined, but Miss Bennet bore it with the heroism of a pincushion. I was putting the finishing touches to the coiffure when some sound made me look round, and I beheld, at a distance of some 50 yards, the entire hunt approaching us at a foot pace. I lost my head, and instead of continuing my task, I dropped the last hairpin as if it were red hot, and kicked the Quaker away to the far side of the road, thus, if it were possible, giving the position away a shade more generously. There were 15 riders in the group that overtook us, and 14 of them, including the whip, were grinning from ear to ear. The 15th was Mr. Tomsey Flood, and he showed no sign of appreciation. He shoved his horse past me and up to Miss Bennet, his red moustache bristling, truculence in every outline of his heavy shoulders. His green coat was muddy, and his hat had a cave in it. Things had apparently gone ill with him. Flurry's witticisms held out for almost 2 miles and a half. I do not give them, because they were not amusing, but they all dealt ultimately with the animosity that I, in common with himself, should henceforth have to fear from Mr. Flood. "Oh, he's a holy terror!" he said conclusively. "He was riding the tails off the hounds to day to beat me. He was near killing me twice. We had some words about it, I can tell you. I very nearly took my whip to him. Such a bull rider of a fellow I never saw. He wouldn't so much stop as to catch Bobby Bennet's horse when I picked her up, he was riding so jealous. His own girl, mind you, and such a crumpler as she got too. I declare she knocked a groan out of the road when she struck it." "She doesn't seem so much hurt," I said. "Hurt?" said Flurry, flicking casually at a hound. "You couldn't hurt that one unless you took a hatchet to her." The rain had reached a pitch that put further hunting out of the question, and we bumped home at that intolerable pace known as a hound's jog. I spent the remainder of the afternoon over a fire in my bedroom in the Royal Hotel, Drumcurran, official letters to write having mercifully provided me with an excuse for seclusion, while the bar and the billiard room hummed below, and the Quaker's 3-cornered gallop wreaked its inevitable revenge upon my person. As this process continued, and I became proportionately embittered, I asked myself, not for the first time, what Philippa would say when introduced to my present circle of acquaintances. I have already mentioned that a dance was to take place at the hotel, given, as far as I could gather, by the leading lights of the Curranhilty hunt. A less jocund guest than the wreck who, at the pastoral hour of 9, crept stiffly down to "chase the glowing hours with flying feet," could hardly have been encountered. The dance was held in the coffee room, and a conspicuous object outside the door was a saucer bath full of something that looked like flour. "Wrap your feet in that," said Flurry. "That's French chalk. They hadn't time to do the floor, so they hit on this dodge." I complied with this encouraging direction, and followed him into the room. Dancing had already begun, and the first sight that caught my eye was Miss Bennet, in a yellow dress, waltzing with Mr. Tomsey Flood. She looked very handsome, and in spite of her accident she was getting round the sticky floor, and her still more sticky partner, with the swing of a racing cutter. Her eye caught mine immediately, and with confidence. Clearly our acquaintance, that in the space of 20 minutes had blossomed tropically into hairdressing, was not to be allowed to wither. Nor was I myself allowed to wither. Men, known and unknown, plied me with partners, till my shirt cuff was black with names, and the number of dances stretched away into the blue distance of tomorrow morning. The music was supplied by the organist of the church, who played with religious unction and at the pace of a processional hymn. I put forth into the mêlée with a junior Bennet, inferior in calibre to Miss Bobby, but a strong goer, and I fear made but a sorry début in the eyes of Drumcurran. At every other moment I bumped into the unforeseen orbits of those who reversed